I was born on a railroad spur up in northern Wisconsin. At that time, they were cutting all the timber and they were hiring loggers to come in, and my dad was a logger there. Not being in town, we didn't have a doctor. My grandmother was going to be my mother's midwife. But when my dad went to call her, before he got back, I was already born. So I didn't have a doctor. Therefore, I never did have a birth certificate. Then we moved on into another place. Mother was going to mop the floor. We had to put on water on the stove to heat up, and she put that on, and it was real hot, and they set it down on the floor, and us kids, about 4 of us, were going to play a game, and they told me to back up, and they backed me right up into that real hot water, and it almost killed me. I had scars all over my body till I was probably 14, 15 years old. But I lived through it, then moved to Charlie Winter's house in Newell, Wisconsin. We had to dig our own well, put in our own pump. We kept our cow up in the neighbor's barn, which was about a quarter of a mile away. We'd have to walk into town, which was a mile away, and we'd sold milk to an old couple. They lived about a half a mile south of us, so we had to carry that down there every time they wanted milk. One day in 1941, we went down to visit my mother's mother, and on the way back, we had 2 vehicles to drive. My dad was driving one, and my aunt was driving the other one with my mother in it, and they had a wreck, and it killed my mother. And after that, we moved to Crandon, Wisconsin, and it was called the Old Indian House because it was right beside the railroad track. The Indians used to live there, and then between us and town there was a big sawmill, and the bums that were riding the train would drop off and go in there as it was coming into town. And we'd have to go through that to milk our cow that was over at my grandpa's house. We stayed there for a short while, and my dad realized that he couldn't keep us kids and work and everything, so he farmed us out to different folks. My brother stayed with my grandmother Buckner, who was my mother's mother, and my sister Clara stayed with my mom's sister, and the 3 younger girls stayed with my grandmother. And me and my oldest sister, Gladys, went with my Uncle Enos, my mother's brother. We stayed there till school was out that year. Then we moved up to Armstrong Creek to a farm. It was way out in the middle of nowhere. Didn't see anybody at all for I don't know how long. Then one day, my uncle and aunt on my dad's side came and took me and Gladys to Elkhart, Indiana. We stayed there until school was just about to start, and then we were shifted to my Aunt Dorothy, who lived in Waukegan, Illinois, and that's where my dad was working. So we stayed there until probably 3-4 months. And then my dad and Almeida got married, and that brought us all back together. We all lived on one of the main streets in Waukegan. And my brother and I would sell newspapers, and then we got into trouble with the guy that we were selling for. He had showed us how to make money by going to the drugstore and buying postcards for a penny a piece and go out in the taverns and that and sell them 2 for a nickel. So we would do that, make enough money to get into the movies or whatever we wanted to do. When we were done there, we'd go home. My brother and I both slept in a bedroom upstairs, and the rest of the family slept downstairs in our apartment. That's why we got to stay out so late all the time, is because nobody knew where we were. Then we moved to a boarding house, and we were taking care of the boarding house. My stepmother was, and collecting the rent and stuff off of that. So we got a job working at Bob O'Farrell's bowling alley. I was only 8 years old at the time, but I had to get a job just like all the rest of them, so I would go and work with them. The way that I got the job when I was only 8 is because me and the boss's son went up there and asked him for a job, and he asked us how old we were. I told him I was 8, and he said, nope, you got to be 9 years old to work here. So we come back the next night, had to wait that night until I knew he got drunk enough that he wouldn't remember how old I was. And we went up there and asked him for it. He said, well, how old are you? I said, 9. He said, okay, I'll put you to work. That was a good little job while it lasted. I made about $1 a night, but that was enough to keep me going. The first night was pretty rough because I had to set double lanes. And that was during the war when all of the sailors would come to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. And they'd come down there to the bowling alley and bowl, and they'd get drunk and they'd throw that ball as hard as they could. It was pretty rough on an 8-year-old. When we got out at 12 o'clock at night, we still had to walk to North Chicago, where the boarding house was. When we were still living in North Chicago, my brother rode his bicycle from there to downtown Waukegan to the bowling alley, and he left it there. And in the meantime, we moved to Winthrop Harbor, and he still left it there. So one night he decided we had to get it home, and he asked me if I'd ride with him, and he put me on the crossbar. It's about 7 miles. We had to go through a little place called Zion, Illinois. It was just before Christmas. I didn't have any gloves, and I was just sitting there getting cold. My dad decided to buy a place up in northern Wisconsin. We moved up there, but everybody moved in the back of an old truck. It was right at 325 miles. And we were all back there, and all of our furniture. We got up there, went out and worked in the woods for a while. Then we decided we had to go to school or we were going to fail that year, so we talked it over with my dad, and we started walking. And the walk there was 3.5 miles each way. And because there was no snowplow, we had to walk through the snow. My little sister was only in the 1st grade. I was in the 4th grade, and she got the worst of it. So some mornings it would be 25 below zero when we left the house. And some days it would only be 15 below. Then it got into the rainy season. They'd bring us by the road and they'd stop and let us off. And we had to walk that the rest of the year. It wasn't real fun. We had mixed grades in each classroom. We only had 3 classrooms. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade was in one classroom. And I could hear everything that was going on for the 8th grade and the 7th grade. And I would sit there and listen to what he was teaching, and especially the reading and the arithmetic. I'd start doing that arithmetic in my head, and I could do all of the 8th grade work. And then when I got into 8th grade, we had a long term of doing nothing but math. And the teacher wanted us to really get into it in depth. And I think that really helped me in my later life, because still yet I can add, subtract, multiply, divide, whatever, better than most. In April of 1945, President Roosevelt died. They let us out for that reason, and we went home. My dad put us to work out in the field, and it was snowing come a blizzard, and we were still out there picking rock out of the field. And that field we had cleared it off, and it was nothing but rock. And I think we took, I believe it was 22 loads of rock off of that 4 acres. Then we moved into town. Then I only had like 13 miles to go to high school. If I missed the bus there, I had to run for 13 miles. Either that or hitchhike. When we went into high school, I had a friend there that never got much to eat. He was a good friend, and I'd take him and I'd buy lunch for both of us. We'd just buy lunch at a grocery store, and we'd buy some lunch meat, a loaf of bread, some ice cream, whatever we wanted to drink, and just eat it there in the store. We could leave it there in the store. They'd never bother it. We'd just eat it there and come back the next day and buy some more and eat some more. So I don't know if my dad ever found out about that, but I just charged, he had a charge account, and I just charged it for my lunch. And he must have thought I ate an awful lot. My dad built a church in town. I helped him do that. After a while, my dad, he was voted in as the district superintendent for the North Central District, and he had to move over to Long Lake when we were in Albin, and that was about 20 miles away. So I had to stay with my brother back on the farm. One day I got caught skipping school and got expelled. He told me not to come back until I brought my dad. So I stayed out 3 or 4 days working in the woods with my dad, and finally he said, "Don't you think you ought to be in school?" I said, "Yeah, I guess I should." And we were having a gymnastic night, and I got ready and went out there on that night, and I asked the principal if I could come back, and he said, "I told you had to bring your dad, not your brother." I said, "My dad lives in Long Lake, and he's gone to Missouri." So he let me come back. The next morning, what happens? My dad gets to thinking, well, I better go and make sure he gets into school so he don't fail his senior year. And he shows up. And I was in shop class, and I looked out the window and I saw them come in. When I got out of shop class, the principal was there and waiting for me. He said, "Well, guess who I saw today?" I said, "Yeah, I know." I saw him come in. He said, "And he wasn't in Missouri." I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, he told me what happened." So he knew I wasn't lying to him. But he told me if I missed one more day of school, that was it. I wouldn't graduate. So I made sure I made every day after that, even if I had to walk. Because there was no school in our district in Wisconsin, we had to go to Iron River, Michigan to go to school. It required either everybody paying their own way out there, driving their own car, or the town buying a bus, or somebody buying a bus and driving it and the town pay them for it. So my dad went ahead and bought a school bus, and we drove the school bus for a while. We could drive that anywhere we wanted because it was our bus and we paid the gas on it and all. So we were driving that back and forth, and the people that wanted to pay us for that, we would take them, and my brother Jack would drive that. We had a school teacher that was teaching at the Elvoy, but she lived in Iron River, and we lived in Wisconsin, but we passed each other about every morning on the way to school. One day, we were going down a hill, and we were both going fast. We were going down the hill, she was coming up, and we just missed each other. And then a day or two later, it was real icy, and we were coming, and I just said, "I hope we don't meet Mrs. Vaughn on one of these curves." And there she was. And she put on her brakes and slid right into us, just in front of the back wheel, tipped our bus over. We went sliding down the road. The miracle was nobody was hurt. One night coming home, we hit a deer and it wound up under the bus, couldn't get out. So my dad reached under the bus and he grabbed the deer by the tail and pulled it out, and it jumped and got away from him. He hollered for my brother to get a jack handle to hit it in the head with, but my brother swung and missed the deer and knocked my dad loose from it. One year in 1948, we had a revival in the little town of Alvin, and everybody in the town got saved except just a few people. We had 180 in Sunday school one morning, and we only had about 100 people in the town of Alvin. One night, we had church all night. My brother and I had to go home, do the chores, get our clothes changed, come back through there to go to school, and they were still in church. I think they were about ready to let out of church. We were so far back there in the woods, it was about 13 miles to Long Lake. My brother had a girlfriend over there. It had been really cold and a lot of snow. My dad wouldn't let him drive the truck, so he took the workhorse. And while he was with his girlfriend, the horse got loose and took off, and he didn't know where to go. We left the horse over there for, I think, about a week. And my dad said, "Well, tomorrow I want you to go get that horse." Now, he's been over there running around for about a week, and I have no idea where he is. He could be anywhere in the country. It turned real cold that night, and the wind was howling through the trees like a tornado. It was probably 20 degrees below zero, and it was real icy on the road going back there, and I had to ride my pony back there. I guess the workhorse smelled my pony, and he come running out to meet us. I had to pin him up and catch him. It was getting dark by that time. I still had probably 12, 14 miles to go home. and it being real icy all the way, we could just walk. And I come to one place where the road is going across a little stream. I just knew that I needed to get off and walk for safety's sake. I knew if I fell down there, if my pony fell on me and broke my leg, I'd be out there in the dark, in the cold, and probably die before anyone come. So I got off and walked, and sure enough, my pony fell down. And we got, about 4 miles from home, and my dad and stepmother come looking for me. Well, I'd been out all day, probably, I think it was around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock that time. When we first moved up to the farm, we always cut maple, and we'd cut some pretty good sized stuff. It might be 2 to 3 foot in diameter. My brother was trying to split it one time with a double-bladed axe, and he hit real hard, and the thing bounced right up and hit him in the head with the other side and split his head. We had a 6-foot fence around the big orchard. The bear were getting in there tearing the trees down. And so my brother went up there to kill a bear. And he was sitting there by a tree and he felt something and he turned around and looked and the bear was behind him. So he shot the bear with a .30-30 and the bear run down in the corner and tried to get out. And my brother run down in there to hem it up. Not scared of the bear, but he should have been. And then one day, him and I were going to work. We were about half a mile away from the house. We were walking down this hill, and I heard a noise, trees breaking in the woods. And I said, "What was that?" And my brother said, "Well, I didn't hear anything." So we listened a while, didn't hear anything, started on. I got just a few steps, and there was some brush breaking going on. And I stopped. I said, "What was that?" And he clapped his hands and yelled, and a bear went, "Rrrr!" And we turned around and ran. He slipped and fell down, and I kept running as fast as I could. And he passed me up in just a minute and went on over the hilltop. And I had to quit running. I couldn't run any farther. When we lived on the farm, my dad would get us up every morning at 4:30. It was my job to build a fire in the cook stove. And if it was winter or cold, I had to build a fire in the heating stove. And then we would go out and milk the cows, strain the milk, feed them hay, and carry the milk down to the spring, do all the barn chores before we got ready to go to school. And at night then when we got home, had to change clothes immediately, get after our chores, because in the wintertime we had to turn the cows all out, go down and chop ice off of the creek, let them drink, then clean the barn, harness the horse, take the manure sled out, scatter the manure on the fields, bring it back in, unharness the horse, put all the cows in their stanchion, feed them all, go get the milking utensils, milk, take care of the milk, go in, eat, go out, and bring in the wood. And one year I remember for Christmas vacation, my job was to cut 2 cord of wood with a bow saw and stack it every day, plus take care of the cows. We had 160 acres on the farm. But later, my dad bought another 40. That gave us 200. We had a lot of water, spring water on that, and a lot of swamp water. And that's what we dammed up to make water for the cows. Had to try to store up enough food all the time to last through the winter, because a lot of times you couldn't get out. We'd go out all over picking berries. We'd pick raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. That was about it that we picked, but we picked a lot of raspberries, made jam and jelly and all that out of it. And, when you have to work so hard, you eat a lot, and my appetite was really, really big. I wasn't very big, but I couldn't seem to eat enough to last me. One morning I ate 21 pancakes, another morning I ate 19, and they weren't little ones. And it was always like that. I was starving to death by the time we come in for dinner. I'd probably eat 5 or 6 biscuits plus all the other food. All the girls would work on the food. All the boys would work outside, cutting wood, whatever had to be done out there. I had 1 brother and 5 sisters. I was close to all of my brothers and sisters, really. We got pretty close together because my dad would go away and leave us there on the farm for a couple weeks at a time, never even come home, and it'd just be the 4 of us. And So we got pretty close together. We had to. Being way back on the farm, we were way out in the Nicolet National Forest. We would kill deer just about any time of the year except, well, not in the spring when they were going to have the little ones or anything. Sometimes we'd kill 10, 12 in a season. And everybody liked it. We would can deer because we didn't have any refrigeration. We had no electricity or running water except for what we ran and got. We would have to do something to keep our meat, and that was to can it, and then we'd sink it back in the swamp somewhere where we could find it, and that would keep it cold, and it would keep it for 2 years if need be. We did what they call sucker fishing. Sucker is a fish with no teeth, and they've got a lot of bones in them, but we all liked them quite a bit. And the way you caught them was by hand, and you had to catch them as the ice was going off of the lakes. They would begin to run down the stream, so you had to try to catch them then, or you couldn't catch them except by hook. But we would catch a lot of them by hand. Yeah, you could run your hand in along their sides and just grab a hold of them and pull them out real quick. One year we caught probably 400 pounds. I still would like to go get some, but it's a long ways up there.